Welcome to The Divide. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to give you a brief respite from political news for the first part of our show today, election-related news, that is, because there's a story in Seattle that many of you asked me to dig a little deeper into. So that's what we're going to do today to begin with. And I think you asked because of some pretty salacious headlines. Take a look. This is in the New York Post. Seattle pays Ex-Pimp $150,000 to offer alternatives to policing. I acknowledge that it's quite the attention-grabbing headline at a time when Seattle is already the subject of national intrigue, and not necessarily in a good way. But there's a lot more to the story behind that headline and to the so-called ex-pimp who stepped into a new role in Seattle's efforts to reimagine policing. Step into the 40th floor office of Seattle's street czar. A $150,000 a year job awarded to Andre Taylor and his Not This Time Foundation by Mayor Jenny Durkin.
I have tried to get a range of people who could be credible messengers to different parts of the community.
As far as the mayor is concerned, Taylor's background makes him one of Seattle's most influential voices on race and policing, someone who can bring the community and even convicted criminals to the table to reimagine policing.
If you're trying to really have these conversations, you need somebody that have been in those streets, that have credibility in those streets, and that's now not in those streets and haven't overcome them streets, right? So that's what a street czar is.
Hands up! Shots fired, shots fired.
After his brother, Shay Taylor, was shot and killed by Seattle police in 2016.
Even if you comply, you die.
Andre Taylor went on to call for systemic police reform, a key backer of voter-approved Initiative 940, which lowered the standard for prosecutors to charge officers for using deadly force.
My name is Andre Taylor. I'm the founder of Not This Time.
It was during that effort that Taylor learned the art and the benefit of playing politics.
So me representing this street community to the governor, to the mayor, to senators, and being able to project that there's a lot like me from there, right? They just need an opportunity, like I got mines.
But in the process, Taylor has become a controversial figure, both among police and among some anti-police protesters. In June, Taylor tried to negotiate a deal between City Hall and protesters occupying the area around SPD's East Precinct, trying to bring the ordeal to an end. In response, angry protesters called him a bootlicker, a phrase used to suggest he's subservient to those in power.
What do you say to people who say that the fact that you speak to the mayor, the fact you have a good relationship with politicians makes you a bootlicker?
I say I'm willing to put my work up against your words. What have you produced? What have you done? Now, once you have changed things, once you have done something, then let's come have that conversation. But if you're just a person out there talking, I'm not going to give too much credence to what you're saying. Do the work like I had to.
But as far as some Seattle police officers are concerned, Taylor is the last person who should be tasked with re-envisioning criminal justice, given his own criminal history. That part of the story takes us back to the late 1990s and Las Vegas, when Taylor, a self-professed pimp nicknamed Gorgeous Dre, was on trial in a federal court. By that time, he'd been accused of several crimes, including transporting a minor across state lines for prostitution. A Las Vegas Sun article at the time reported on comments that the judge in the case made about Taylor's involvement with a 16-year-old girl. U.S. District Judge Howard McKibbin said he is deeply troubled by the permanent scarring the girl must deal with since Andre Taylor introduced her to prostitution. McKibbin said he saw great fear in the girl's eyes as she struggled to testify against Taylor at his September trial. That girl is you, correct?
That is me, yes.
Megan Fishman is now 38 years old, but recalls vividly that time in her life. Before she met Andre Taylor, she was living at a group home in Vegas.
A friend of mine and myself, we decided we were going to run away from the group home. And we went down to, of course, the Las Vegas Strip. And we were walking, and I crossed paths with him, and we started talking.
Did you kind of know what he was into?
No, he caught my eye. He was just someone that I was attracted to. And the more that we conversated, we just seemed to click.
Megan said she lied to Taylor at the time, telling him she was 18. What was the nature of the relationship that you had and built with him?
I looked up to as a mentor. He was my provider. He became my everything.
Was this a romantic relationship that you had with him?
Yeah, it was all around everything type of relationship. Yes.
So was he your pimp?
Yes.
She seems to look back at that time almost fondly, referring to Taylor as a provider.
What would you say to people who think, well, that lifestyle, especially for someone underage, it isn't security and it's not real stability?
I don't know. I guess until you walk in, a mile in those shoes, you can't really understand what that person's going through. There are a lot of people out there that are forced and that are manipulated and abused and neglected and put in those type of situations where their lives are tormented. They do have scarring, and my situation was not one of them.
I'll be honest, some people might say that you sound brainwashed.
Yeah, I'm not though.
While Taylor helped arrange our interview with Megan, she says she is the one who wanted to speak up.
It's not fair. They're holding something against him that it shouldn't be. This was done, it's over with, and people need to move forward.
Megan says she felt compelled to come forward after recent stories resurrected Andre Taylor's time as a pimp, pointing to his problematic past as a way to question his lucrative job with the city. A sentiment Taylor says stands in contrast to what both the left and the right preach about second chances.
Especially in far left-leaning Seattle. All you guys talk about is restorative justice, where here is a situation here where we can point people to as if to say, listen, you know the story he had, but look at how he recovered and changed his life, But instead of pointing to that story, right, they said, whatever I've done, never murdered anybody, never killed anybody, but what you've done, there's no forgiveness for.
Mayor Jenny Durkin puts things more bluntly. She had this to say about stories that amplify Taylor's past as a way to push him down in the present.
I actually think they're racist. I think that we are a country that believes in redemption, and that if people come out of a criminal past, they have a right to remake themselves and to do something positive in the community. And I think they're just very hyperbolic. And again, it's a reflection of these partisan times where you're either good or you're bad. You can't be someone who can be working for positive change and disagree with you.
I changed my life to make sure that young people that are in those vices to this day could see that, listen, there is life after the streets. There is life. If you was hustling, gangbanging, pimping, whatever it was, to be able to say to that young person that might not listen to somebody who might be quote unquote perfect or squeaky clean, right? But they'll listen to me because he feels like I'm not judging him. And I know exactly what his conditions are, but I'm leading him somewhere through my life.
And look, criminal justice reform is also something the president has focused on, maybe something he doesn't get enough credit for. The idea that people who have turned their lives around, even while still behind bars, are worthy of a second chance. So if you apply that same sentiment to Andre Taylor, well, maybe 20 years later, his criminal history shouldn't preclude him from this new position. Of course, there is a whole separate debate that maybe we can have at another time about whether this idea of a street czar will actually be effective or whether it's just another feel-good position that the city holds up as a solution. I guess we'll give him some time in that role before we circle back on that. All right, coming up after the break.